We are the earth, we are the sea. Won't stop right until we are free. We are the earth, we are the sea. Won't stop right until we are free. We are the earth, we are the sea. Won't stop right until we are free. We are the earth, we are the sea. Won't stop right until we are free. Let's hear it. We are the earth, we are the sea. Won't stop right until we are free. We are the earth, we are the trees. Won't stop right until we are free. We are the earth, we are the sea. Won't stop right until we are free. Let me hear y'all. We are the earth, we are the sea. We won't stop right until we are free. Louder! We are the earth, we are the sea. We won't stop right until we are free. Last time! We are the earth, we are the sea. We won't stop right until we are free.
So yeah, Earth Celebrations is an organization I started, 30 years ago as a way of to apply the arts, the inspirational power of the arts to engage community on environmental issues. I'm Felicia Young, and I came to these ideas of applying cultural strategies to impact change. It really goes back very early, but primarily, if I go back to even high school, where I interned at the Metropolitan Museum of Art within the African section. I did an internship, and I started looking at the masks and the costumes and the different ceremonial objects, and realizing that even though I was looking at them, that they really weren't intended to be viewed within the context of a museum or gallery context, that they were part of a ceremony, and that ceremony had a social function, whether it was a rites of passage or funeral or agricultural ceremony. So that was sort of my, probably my first real comprehension of the difference between art in galleries and art that, what context and what is the purpose of it. So we organized the first pageant in 1991 and had workshops that went on for many months. And we built the pageant. In the first year, thousands of people participated, and it was an all-day long 12-hour pageant, and it went to about 50 different community gardens. And at every garden there was a performance and ceremony that celebrated the history of that garden and its current struggles for preservation. And I was interested in the pageant art form because it involved music, dance, theater, poetry. It engaged thousands, of different people within a community to basically enact and tell a story. So as an art form, I was very interested in that. Also, pageants on the Lower East Side, in the neighborhood I was living in at the time, had also cultivated pageants in the early 1900s as a way of sort of social reform pageants. These theatrical pageants were created by community members along with artists and theatrical directors, with oftentimes not just a goal of sort of redefining what the new America was with all this diverse immigrant population, but also as a way of social reform. And they even had what were called protest pageants. Anyway, so with that in mind, living on the Lower East Side, 1990, if you can imagine, now there are only 48 community gardens. Back then there were over 60 community gardens. So that was the whole thing. I was looking around the neighborhood and I just said, wow, these gardens are just amazing. I mean, they were created out of vacant rubble-strewn lots, city neglect out of the 70s. And people living in the neighborhood and also in other communities throughout New York City had said, we're tired of living in a dump in a dangerous place. We're going to improve it for ourselves. And it was really a volunteer initiative. So back in 1990, there were over 60 community gardens, and in response to them being threatened by proposed development, I said, well, let me see what I can do in my own community to try to protect it, because I knew Adam Purple's garden had recently been bulldozed, and was trying to see, well, what other options? So my approach to trying to impact an issue in my own neighborhood was to apply this pageant art form, sort of as a form of community organizing.
You stand before La Plaza Cultural. Let the children play, let there be love. Listen to the birds sing in the willows. Viva La Plaza! Enjoy it!
It is up to all of us, the collective green space constituency, to instigate and effect the change by taking our plight to the streets and to the post office.
Urban dwellers, honor well the children's garden, a place to practice dreaming.
To be sustainable, to be able. I was born of nothing, came from nothing, and remain nothing. Where soil is an absolute interrogation, a prepared expression of the opening up of things, the dynamics of language and sound. What seems like a closed book is more like an explanation of logic. Born of nothing, came of nothing, remain nothing. Lingual tapping, haunted wind growling, howling as it approaches time's demise, referencing the slowly melting mountains. To sustain, to be sustainable, to be able. There is a trunk composed of ashes and limbs and paper and plastic and oil and fire and ice. The painted relics shudder like mirrors, shuttered like windows, punctured like memories reproduced, replicas of deceased things. Vanishing language, vanishing species, endangered cities, vanishing concepts, impermanent birthdays. Where the earth is, where is the earth when we need it the most? The earth, where the earth is, where is the earth when we need it the most? What is the world turned into? Whatever happened to the rainforest and acid rain, AIDS and tolerance? The 10,000 things are all things, the clouds, an ageless jawbone. What does a whole earth mean? What tools are left in our catalog to sustain, to be sustainable, to be able? They sang, we are the world and we are the children, before the blue lake and the green lake and the white lake.
I would say that right now we are not far from zero in terms of making progress. As a matter of fact, we are losing gardens. Let's say from 15 they will save 2 or 1 gardens, and that is basically the position that different communities are coming out. Some community which is have already information basically are not saving any garden.
Miguel and I were married in Green Oasis Garden, and Manu says that Clara was conceived in the garden. I won't confirm or deny that.
Early this morning, down on Forsyth Street, a huge bluebird flew down, and a band of garden spirits crossed into our world over a rainbow bridge. They were here to start a journey to honor and protect all the gardens of the Lower East Side.
You know, apply the idea of a pageant as a way of mobilizing the community, and essentially by going garden to garden to garden over the course of 12 hours and all the 9 months of workshops and community building that happened. I mean, with 50 different community partners from different sectors of the community. You know, we were essentially doing what is community organizing, except our approach to the organizing was through the arts and engaging people to exploring these issues, you know, by creating performances, by creating visual art, music, poetry, dance. So you have all these 6 months of both partnership building and creative collaboration that then result in the culminating public cultural action, you know, the pageant itself. So if you had just what would be called a protest, you know, maybe you'd get activists involved, but you wouldn't get the sort of larger diverse group of the community that found different entry points into what we were doing. And so I always say that the approach of what we were trying to do to impact issues is not protest. It's what I call really joyous affirmation and engaging the community to affirm what are these positive assets and, like the gardens and natural sustainability sites or the river, and reconnect people to these natural sites within the urban environment. The project ended up developing over 15 years, and as the gardens got more and more threatened by development, we then branched out to not just do the pageant, but then to also form a garden preservation coalition. So we had a Lower East Side Garden Preservation Coalition, and then when Mayor Giuliani went after and tried to sell off the gardens throughout all of New York City, we reached out, engaged gardeners from Harlem, the Bronx, Upper West Side, and Brooklyn, and formed a citywide coalition. Our ideal dream was to see if we could preserve the gardens and preserve them permanently, but whether that could be a reality or not was really unclear when we were up against the largest development interests in New York City, as well as the mayor.
We're trying to say something with this. What do you think it is?
What do they mean to you, those gardens in New York City?
They mean sanity and humanity and community and beautiful stuff.
And what's the purpose of the rally today?
The rally today is to plead with our government, our leaders, and let them know how much these gardens mean to us, and please don't destroy them, because they intend to destroy every single one of them.
You think they will listen to you, to your plea?
I think they will eventually, whether or not it's too late to save most of the gardens, who knows.
I know it was an amazing example of how a community was able to tell its story, take action, and preserve what they had created.
You'll be known by your fruit, the fruit you bear. In other words, this is not one little garden. This is not one little garden. We have worked for 10 years on 15,000 square feet.
The village is not going anywhere. It's going to be more things happening all the time.
Hello, gardeners. Hello. Hello, open space people.
Hey, what's up?
Hi. Today is about New York City's green space and the present administration's lack of understanding of the value of that space and the crucial role it plays in a community's well-being.
The winds of the west is a place of deep waters to look for. The winds of the west is the empress of the Pacific waters, home of the beautiful shelters. Come, Mother Jaguar, come, Sister Jaguar, come, the Rainbow Jaguar. Come and give us power and strength so that we may meet the challenges of preserving these gardens today.
Oh, I brought lavender from our Brooklyn Bear garden, from our herb garden. Little sachets.
And what's going to be your proposition?
My proposition. Wake up and smell the lavender. We need to save our community gardens. We need green spaces, right? We need trees and flowers and birds and butterflies. We need our communities.
So after the Save Our Gardens, it was called the Rites of Spring Procession to Save Our Gardens. It went from 1991 to 2005, 15 years. Thankfully, with many gardens saved by the end of it. Then I started thinking about, well, how can I apply what was successful in terms of these strategies to other issues? And again, it was like 10 different sites that were either architectural sites within the park that each had a particular significance, whether it was a waste catchment area where the tides would bring in a lot of floating garbage, and then the staff would come with these large skimmers and clean it out. There were river grasses areas that we were able to collect the river grass and turn that into costuming, and also the idea that you would plant wetlands to buffer erosion and sea level rise. So there were many different sites. Charles Street was a site where they had the catch and release program. You had at Houston Street the boathouse, which was now coming back to life with people paddleboarding and kayaking. So we could stage, I said, a dance of costume kayaks.
I am a Native American New Yorker. I'm a native New Yorker. Creator, thank you for all of Mother Earth and Turtle Island, who brings us this grass that covers and provides oxygen to all mankind, birds and things. Give us thanks for the birds and the trees that populate and perform their duties and instructions as handed down by the Creator. All of these things are connected, that they are all of one body and mind, that give thanks to the understanding that mankind is becoming of one mind, to know that the blade of grass that we are now standing on is here and following the instructions as handed down by the Creator, and that we must continue to provide those duties that were given to us to maintain its survival and the survival of our environment. Thank you all for being here today and coming of one mind, because this is where our strength is.
The town of Madurai, where actually my family is from, that festival that inspired me with the pageants to do the Save Our Gardens pageant. I go back and I see 25 years later how polluted that Vaigai River had become, and some friends that I had from back in 1989 were still there. And they said that they were working with this professor on a book on the Vaigai, and I said, oh, well, I did a Hudson River pageant, maybe we should do a Vaigai pageant. I mean, I was influenced by the Meenakshi Chittarai festival. What seemed to be missing is that people were using basically the river as a dump site, and that all these companies had brought plastic bottles, and years ago everything, it was like clay cups. They didn't really have that much plastic, and so this was happening in, you know, a pretty large-sized city, this amount of garbage. And it was all ending up in the river, and then Tamil Nadu is the area in India that's so impacted also because of climate with severe drought. So what little water was there was then highly polluted. So here I applied the same cultural strategies now in India, enlisting core partner organizations, and from there built over 50 partnerships with local organizations, schools, groups, artisans, farmers, as well as government officials. It was for many months that we organized workshops and engaged these groups to explore environmental and climate issues impacting the river and its solutions. You know, what started out as just my idea with a pageant then grew into an entire international exchange program with Columbia University and students and professors going to India. I mean, it was, you know, it was not where I thought it would go. So, but you never know when you start on a project and you share your idea where things may end up.
Water is splashing over the seawalls at the tip of lower Manhattan. Widespread flooding is the biggest concern in the nation's largest city as Hurricane Sandy approaches. Forecasters say the storm surge could reach 11 feet.
It really became apparent after Hurricane Sandy, you know, where the Lower East Side was completely devastated by flooding. And so they were given federal funds to build and formalize a lot of the green infrastructure that already existed, such as bioswales, water harvesting ponds. People finally recognized that the gardens being permeable surfaces, they were one of the reasons that the floodwaters receded, and because the gardens could absorb the floodwaters. So all of a sudden the gardens that we had advocated for preserving all those years as sort of open space, outdoor community centers, outdoor environmental learning centers, all of a sudden now it had a whole new role. It was, you know, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, you know, green infrastructure. Many of the gardens already had water harvesting ponds, pollinator gardens. They had all these things. You know, it's amazing because while we're doing these things locally in the neighborhood now, because I think there's, you know, much more activation on climate in general, we've been able to take, you know, our story of what are these local climate solution models and then represent them in these larger forums like the climate story. But had we not preserved the gardens, well, you wouldn't have the birth of all these urban climate solutions now in the neighborhood. And then if you took sort of a bird's eye view of what was going on back when I was developing the project in 2016, after Hurricane Sandy, you had the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. So you now had like a whole federal city, you know, along actually the whole Atlantic seaboard, you know, they were developing climate resiliency to flooding projects. And there was one happening in New York, and that one on the lower part of Manhattan on the east side is called the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. So it was sort of a major, largest redevelopment plan in the history of New York. At that time when I got involved, the community was being engaged in developing this plan. So if you saw what was happening on the waterfront in terms of climate resiliency, the climate solutions that were happening now within the gardens we had helped preserve, and then other sustainability initiatives. You had the Earth School with a green roof. You had other solar energy community power projects that people were trying to get started. So you had many of these initiatives all coming together, and if you looked at it, it really was an incredible model of a sustainable urban ecosystem, and nobody was really looking at it sort of connecting the dots. People are looking at the gardens or they're looking at the waterfront, but they're not really seeing it as a sustainable, cohesive urban plan that's really grassroots generated. And so that was it. Like once I could see that vision, I just knew that I had to create a new pageant that would mobilize and engage the community again on this very important plan. The city, you know, you will always have sort of the government, the city, the state that will say, oh, we want to, you know, we have a whole sustainability department and we're putting billions of dollars into, you know, green infrastructure plans and climate mitigation adaptation. But they say they're doing that and they're trying to generate plans. At the same time, they're actually actively destroying things like the Elizabeth Street Garden that the community invested in and created that are thriving climate solutions on a local level. So I'm very focused on the process. So it's not just sort of like how many gardens you got saved or, you know, and if you get those policy changes, I mean, that's great. But the process of getting people to learn about resource sharing and collaboration and sharing of talents, and that, you know, together, if we combine what each of us can do, you know, together we are so much more powerful in terms of what we can accomplish.
The world is not a dump, and what you do does count.
To dream a butterfly, a worm, a caterpillar, do you have to see one? And where, in our steel oasis, do you begin to look? A concrete corner, 12th and B, is as good a place as any to begin to sift through rocks and mind and earth to feel connections.
Now this rally sends a clear message across the street to City Hall that community gardeners across the city deserve to be consulted early in neighborhood development plans.
Water and everything around us reacts to our love. It reacts to our respect. Even the water out of the tap reacts to you thanking it and to respecting the water that you shower with that comes out of the tap.
Well, we need more people to tell the city to make it easy for people to compost everywhere.
I got a love that's proven like the water. I got to keep it moving like the water. If you build up walls, I will break them all. I got original mother, the water. Walk to the rhythm of the beats for the water. She got everything we need. The water, she's alive within. Baby, might easy win. Pray with my grandmothers. The water. There ain't no life without her. Oh, the water. She's our past and our future. The water. I got to keep it moving like the water, like the water. Crank it.